behind closed doors, beyond the walls. Silent voices, stolen years. We stand together, face their fears. A world that has turned away for too long, but now we rise to make things right. Hear their cries across nations, breaking chains of devastation. With diplomacy and justice strong, we'll fight until the darkness is gone. Awareness illuminates the way forward. For every tear shed, justice and truth will emerge. We listen to their cries. Training those who guard the gate, teaching them how to investigate, bringing nations and advocates together, building networks that last forever, setting wrongs to right, prosecution for those who cause harm, reaching out with open arms. Hear their cries throughout the nations, breaking free from destruction. With diplomacy and justice firmly established, we'll keep fighting until the darkness clears. Awareness lights the way ahead. For every tear shed, justice and truth will come to light. We hear and listen to their cries. For the brave who dare to speak, whistleblowers strong, not weak. We lobby, advocate, and stand as a shield of safety in our hands. When the world finally understands, genuine change begins to flow. Data speaks and hearts awaken for every child's priceless say. Hear their cries across nations, breaking chains of destruction. Accountability will come for every daughter, every son. Compensation and healing begin, mending broken, wounded hearts. Justice echoes across the skies. We hear their cries. We hear their cries. And we will answer every time.
Live on the air, it's Trial Junkies United with your host, Z. Yep. That's because you didn't hit your button.
Did I thought? There we go.
Sorry. I just hit it. So, okay. That's fine.
Oops, forgot to hit the button. Okay. So, how you doing, Doc?
I am just peachy.
I love it when you're peachy. But tonight we're going to shine a light on the forgotten stories that society wants to leave buried, and I mean really deeply buried. Buckle up. The path ahead grows really bumpy as we're going to lead you through another section of this nightmare they call the justice system. And tonight we're going to do something a little different and a little bigger. We had the privilege of interviewing Professor Andrew MacLeod, which led to a robust conversation that we had to split into two parts. And this is going to be part one. And Doc and I will be right here in the chat with you while we experience this together. So we're going to show it to you and then hang out, And I think it's going to be fun. Hey, Adam. Glad to see you, darling. And we're going to be discussing some grown-up topics. And we're going to use grown-up words. I'm not monetized yet, so we can use some grown-up words. Because the professor doesn't pull any punches. But we're delighted and proud to report that through his organization that he co-founded, it's called HearTheirCries.org. Professor MacLeod has played a major part in winning a major international lawsuit, you guys, using innovative technology to bring reparations to children abandoned by the men who fathered them through sex workers. Also, military, UN officials, those kind of situations. For years, the sex tourists and abusive aid workers have escaped with not getting in trouble when they impregnate vulnerable women and even children in these developing worlds until now. And there's a new precedent for accountability. And on December 19th in 2023, in the King's Bench trial in Edmonton, Canada, utilizing cutting-edge technology for DNA techniques to identify fathers and hold them accountable for their actions. This precedent can be applied in all common law jurisdictions, including the UK, Australia, the US, and New Zealand. So, using genetic genealogy, which we all love, because we all know that we are solving cold cases, but this is the first time in any jurisdiction that the court accepted the parentage of a child by combining familial DNA evidence with travel records. Think about it. And this isn't just a legal victory, truth seekers. This is a weapon against those who thought they could commit crimes in the shadows and walk away clean. This is what accountability for crossing borders. This is justice, and it's evolving. So settle in. We're going to sit down with Professor MacLeod to discuss how this precedent was won, what it means for survivors worldwide, and how genetic genealogy is becoming the nightmare that predators never saw coming. So welcome to the Trial Junkies United. Let's get going, Doc. Let's start hunting some hunters.
All right.
Quick introduction is we're talking with Professor Andrew MacLeod, and we're talking about the different subjects of trafficking and also just DNA for children that are finding themselves in a situation, whether it be by adoption or because their mother was trafficked and they don't know who their father is. So we're going to talk about some of the genealogy. So welcome. And we appreciate you talking with us, Professor MacLeod.
Thank you very much. It's good to be with you.
And as we were talking beforehand, we were talking about the situation with the female teachers in the beginning. And I thought you made an excellent point because we were talking about how it seems here in the States, the court system does not treat a female predator the same as a male predator when it comes to sentencing. The women seem to get off more lightly. And I liked the point you were making about, well, for one thing, with a male predator, a lot of times they will use violence, where perhaps with a female, that isn't, especially if it's perhaps a 15-year-old boy.
It's more coercion than,
Yes.
And it's not just the use of violence, it's the threat of violence that can be left unsaid. because you have a physically larger male in front of a smaller female. The coercion doesn't need to be said, and the fear is felt. So whilst I agree with the general principle that all predators, when caught, should be punished about the same, there is a qualitative difference on male abuse against a female victim because A, the male has the threat of violence, and B, it is the female that bears the risk of pregnancy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and like I brought out to you over here, it seems like we're having these female teachers that are turning out pregnant. I don't know if they're doing it deliberately, you know, but I just can't even imagine some young child, you know, he's 14 or 15 and all of a sudden he's a father.
Yeah, and unpack it one generation further. The child is then born, and at some stage when the child's 5, 10, 20, 25, starts to say, well, who's my daddy? And when the child finds out the truth, which ultimately they will, particularly with the expansion of DNA testing and commercial DNA testing, it's going to be an identity crisis for that child that's got to come to terms with the fact that he was born of a predatory abuse. And I've done a lot of work in the last few years with children who have been born of abuse, and they do have trauma as a result of that. Now, I'm a middle-aged white guy. You know, I'm normally the sort of bloke that pushes back on woke ideology and woke language. And, you know, when people talk about intergenerational trauma, I sort of bristle and go, really? But really, it's true. And it's only when you start working with the children who have these huge identity crises. Do I have a father? Do I have a brother? Do I have a sister? Who are my grandparents? And when they find out who it is, like one of the children I'm working with in the Philippines, we found her father, who's a dirtbag from hell. And the child has said to me, all I want is my father to give me a hug, and he admits he's my dad. And he won't. He's been fighting us all the way through court. So this child now internalizes this trauma that not only does she not really know who her father is and have no access to her half-brothers and half-sisters, but she has a father who deliberately denies her existence. Now, it doesn't matter how strong this child is. She's going to grow up with issues that result from that. So there are secondary issues that come from children born of rape and abuse.
Because she's going to have an identity crisis.
Yeah.
And trying to make it that, hey, it's not me, it's him. Those are adult things to try and handle.
I'll talk about this case a little bit more. This child, she's now just turned 18 actually, but she was 14 when we took her DNA and about 15 when we found her father. She has a very big dimple on her chin, and she's very introverted and shy and sits over a little hunch. Really good student, but a really quiet kid. Sits over like this. And when I found the father, the photo of the father has a very strong dimple on his chin. And I showed the picture to the child, and she just rubbed her dimple. She sat upright. She said, that's where I get it from. And you saw this whole weight lift off her shoulders as she started to get a vision of a whole half of her heritage that she had no idea about. So she literally went from this to this.
Yeah.
Just by seeing a photo.
And I don't think people, maybe some do, but I think a lot of people don't understand that in some of these other countries, when you have perhaps military personnel that end up producing children and then leaving, that their country does not appreciate these children. They're ostracized from their mother's country. So
I'll give you
these
I'll give
kids
you a
are
very
just
good
so
example of that.
lost.
Yeah. So back in December, we took 20 DNA samples of mixed race children around a British Army base in Nanyuki in Kenya, about 2 hours drive north of Nairobi. Now, this British Army base has been there from colonial days, 80, 90, 100 years. So there's generations of mixed race kids. And Kenyans are very dark black. So a mixed race kid as a coffee color is very obviously mixed race. And a 50-50 child, 50% black, 50% white, we're used to looking at as black and they're suffering black prejudice. But in Kenya, they're considered white. And they get a really different type of prejudice that, oh, you're white, you've got a white father, you must be rich. Therefore, we're charging you more every time you walk into a shop. And for Kenyans, they look at a mixed race child and they don't consider the child black, they consider the child white. And to put it in the US context, Barack Obama, whose mother was white and his father was Kenyan, but the average Kenyan on the street, they don't look at Barack Obama as the first black president because in their cultural context, he's white.
Right.
Yeah. So here are all these soldiers that have been coming in and out of Kenya for decades. Now, the youngest kid we took DNA from was 1 year old. The oldest kid we took DNA from was, wait for this, 68.
Oh,
And a 68-year-old has been living his entire life in poverty, prejudiced against because he's white, and didn't know who he was. And to give you an idea of how important he thought it was, you know, he lives in a real little hovel in a slum area, but when we went to take his DNA, he dressed up in a suit and tie and his Sunday best that he keeps pressed because for him, you know, we coming searching for his family was so important to him that he had to dress up in his Sunday best just to spit in a tube. And, you know, we just don't fully understand the full ramifications of this and put it back in the US context again. The largest military bases in support of the Vietnam War were the Clark Air Force Base and the Subic Bay Naval Base in northern Philippines. Surprisingly, it was US soldiers that triggered a whole lot of sex abuse and dragging women into the sex industry on R&R. And now we have multi-generations of people who have been fathered by US servicemen who don't know where their fathers are. Now, some of the children, we've taken 37 DNA samples in the slum north of Manila and found 34 fathers, most of whom are Americans, and most of those are US servicemen from around about the time of Vietnam War up until the eruption of the Mount Pinatubo volcano, which closed the Subic Bay and Clark bases. And now the United States has got an agreement back with the Philippines again to send more soldiers back into the Philippines as part of the defense against China. But there's nothing in US policy that is stopping US personnel doing the same thing. And here's the thing that really upsets me sometimes. When you approach some of these fathers, they say, oh, but I paid for it. Why are you trying to hold me to account? And an incredibly high number of academic feminists saying to me, why are you holding the men to account? And I'm like, we're getting the rights of children, not the rights of mothers. And every child has the right to know who their father is. And
yes.
There's so many interactions on that we can unpack.
I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, just the fact that, number one, you don't know if the mother was there willingly. I mean, she could have been trafficked or sold by a family member to make money for the family. So she might not have been willing at first. So
you don't need to unpack that when you look at everything through the lens of the child, not the lens of the mother. Yes, you know, we should just come back half a step and explain to your listeners what this project is about, because they'll be scratching their head at the moment, going, "Hang on, how have we gone down this rabbit hole?" And this rabbit hole came from this. I'm a lawyer. I specialised in war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide, and worked for the Red Cross in former Yugoslavia and Rwanda in the 1990s, then moved across to the UN, worked for the UN for years. And the more senior I became in the UN, the more I became aware of the enormous amount of abuse of women and children perpetrated by UN staff. Now, I say not just peacekeeping staff, but UN civilian staff who largely come from Western countries, people who look like me. And I got to a certain level of seniority that I realized that you either change it from inside or you leave. We tried to change it from inside, and the UN is littered with the corpses of whistleblowers who tried to raise the issue of abuse in women and children. And before your listeners start to think I'm some crazy conspiracy theorist eating pizzas in the basement of a shop in Washington, I asked them to Google the following: Rachel Weisz, the actress, the movie Whistleblower. Yeah. And the movie Whistleblower, which is on Netflix in most jurisdictions, tells the story of a US policewoman who was seconded into the UN security teams in the war in Bosnia and uncovered a trafficking ring where 14 and 15-year-old girls were trafficked out of Moldova into Bosnia during the war, chained up in a nightclub called Florida 2000 for the exclusive use of UN staff. This is so well known, it's been turned into a movie. And when you watch the movie on Netflix, Remember, this is the script that the lawyers approved. What actually happened is much, much worse than you see in the movie. When you're shocked by that, then Google food for sex scandal, UN High Commission for Refugees. And what you will find is in the early 2000s, during the wars in Liberia and Sierra Leone, often families were only allowed into refugee camps when they handed over one of their children for sexual favours. Now, I know that to be fact because I was head of early warning and emergency preparedness for the UN High Commission for Refugees at the time, and I saw all the paperwork coming across my desk about what we knew. You had, during the Ebola crisis in Eastern Congo, World Health Organization staff abusing women and children during the Ebola crisis.
Right.
And you think of this and go, hang on, here is this highly infectious disease spread by bodily fluids, and these men still feel so much impunity that they will abuse women in those circumstances. So what I did is I quit the UN in 2009. They offered me a promotion. I said no. I quit the UN and I started to lobby for governments to take the issue of sexual abuse by the aid industry seriously, and very few governments would, particularly left-wing governments, because left-wing governments would see this as a secret right-wing conspiracy to attack foreign aid. And I'm like, this is about child abuse.
Yeah.
And a lot of people said to me, Andrew, you're risking our funding. And I would say to them, there are three types of people in the world: those abusing children, those covering up the abuse of children, and those trying to stop the abuse of children. And if you think the third one is threatening your funding, then you need remedial lessons in ethics. And it was amazing how much of the criticism of my advocacy was coming from left-wing feminism.
Now,
And there's a branch of
that blows my mind.
well, there's a branch of feminism called misandristic feminism. That is feminism which is not driven by the protection of women. It's driven by the hatred of men. So they would say things to me like, you're a middle-aged white man, you have no right to participate in this debate. This is a women's issues men should keep out. Men are perpetrating it,
Right.
so men have got to stop it, right? So it's actually a man's behavioural issue, not a women's behavioural issue. It's why I get so upset when
it's
and
humanity.
it's a human issue.
It's
Yeah.
humanity's issue, people.
Yeah, but think about this phrase for a second: violence against women.
Right.
What happens when you say the phrase violence against women? Two things happen. One, subconsciously, you start thinking about the behaviour of women as if women's behaviour needs to change. And the second thing that happens is you're talking about it in a female context in a women's discussion. So women start to listen and men start to disengage. So you subconsciously blame the women for their behaviour and you disengage men from the discussion. If instead of saying violence against women, which is blaming the victim, you say violence by men, you suddenly realize that you've got to look at the behavior of men and you need to engage the discussion in groups of men because it's men whose behavior needs to change. But here's the kicker. Who are the greatest victims of violence by men? Answer, men. Men are more likely to die being king hit on the street. Men are more likely to be caught up in brawls. Ironically, one of the things that's happened because we have this dialogue about violence against women, women are scared to go out and families don't let their daughters go out. But all the data shows men are more likely to be victims of stranger danger and women are more likely to be victims of someone they already know.
That happens in the indigenous community, the native indigenous community too.
Correct. Correct.
It's more that the men, we have more missing men and boys than we do women and girls, but it's the women and girls that are getting the attention.
Yeah. So let me unpack where this links to the DNA. So I realized that I had a hell of a fight to fight left-wing governments to realize that abuse by aid workers isn't attacking the aid industry. Fixing it is trying to fix the aid industry. And some of these misandristic feminists would say you don't have any academically defensible data, you're exaggerating the problem, you're only projecting your own behaviour, yada, yada, yada. And on the, exaggerating the problem, I'm like, okay, what's the acceptable level of child abuse? And the answer is 0. So it doesn't matter if the real number is 10, 100, 1,000, it's got to be stopped.
Right.
And they're non-academically defensible, no academically defensible data. So how do we actually prove the scale of abuse? Well, a subset of victims is women who have been abused, women and girls between the age of puberty and menopause who got pregnant and had a child. right? That's a tiny subset of the victims. If you can show that tiny subset of victims is quite large, then you show that the abuse is large. So with interviews of only 2,000 women in Haiti, we found 267 children born of abuse by UN peacekeepers from only 2,000 interviews.
Wow.
And you go, right, how do you link the child to the father? Now, back in 2015, 2016, 2017, in the UK, there are a whole lot of cases that were called the ISIS bride cases, 14, 15-year-old girls
Right,
that
I remember those.
took themselves out of England, married an ISIS fighter. Things went wrong. They wanted to come home. The British removed their citizenship. And then the media said to girls, you made your choices, bad luck. But a couple of the girls were pregnant, and the media said, but what about the unborn child? Because the unborn child is British. And I looked at the Immigration Act, and the Immigration Act says, if you're born of a British national parent, you are by right a British citizen.
Yeah.
It doesn't talk about the circumstance of procreation. Your parents didn't have to be married. It doesn't have to be the father anymore, although it used to have to be the father. So hang on. If a British man goes overseas and abuses a woman or a child, and that woman or child gets pregnant, that resulting child is a British citizen as of birth, and similar in many other jurisdictions around the world as well. Mm-hmm. And I was like, but how do you prove who the father is? And then in 2018, you started to hear about the Golden State Killer case in California.
Oh, yeah. That was a big one.
Right. Now, for your listeners, this guy raped and murdered a whole lot of women, late 70s, early 80s, was never found. Cold case investigator opens the file around about 2017, 2018, finds DNA on the crime scene, puts it on the national DNA database, and nothing comes back. He then thinks laterally and puts the crime scene DNA on 23andMe, Ancestry.com, and the other commercial databases. Didn't get a direct match, but found a whole lot of extended relatives.
Right.
And by mapping out the extended relatives, you can triangulate backwards and say, wow, the only human beings in the world that are related to this range of extended relatives are these, say, 10 people. Exclude all the females, because they didn't rape. It's these 5. Yeah. So they followed those 5 guys around and picked up DNA from a discarded Starbucks cup, cigarette butt, I believe DNA extracted from the fingerprints on the back of a door handle of a car. And that's how they got him. Turned out he was a California policeman and he's now in jail. So I'm listening to this and I went, if a guy goes overseas and rapes or abuses a woman or a child and she gets pregnant, the resulting child has 50% the mother's DNA and 50% the father's DNA.
Right.
While the Golden State Killer case had 100% of the perpetrator's DNA, I've now got, through the child, 50% of the perpetrator's DNA. Could I put the child's DNA with the consent of the child and the mother through the same process as the Golden State Killer case and find the father? So I went to Leicester University, which is the first university to map the human genome, and they said, no one's ever thought of that, but yes, you can. So now I'm like, hang on. If a child is born of abuse, I can take the child's DNA, isolate the father's side of the DNA, put it through the commercial DNA databases, map out the family, find the father. Once I find the father, I can get citizenship rights for the child. If the child's still under 18, I can get child support orders for the child. I can give the child an identity and I can give the child a future. Wow. So I cooked up a plan with King's College University, where I'm a visiting professor in genetics, the law firm that I chair, and the charity I set up, Hear Their Cries. And if people want to see it, just go to heartheircries.org, hearing the cries of whistleblowers, hearing the cries of victims. I'm getting ready to go to Eastern Congo. So you can't choose fathers in advance, but you can choose the likely demographic of the fathers based on the demographic of men who abuse in that circumstance. So if you're standing around outside a British Army base in Kenya, the fathers are likely to be British soldiers. If you go to sex tourism bars in Philippines, the fathers are likely to be sex tourists. If you go to Eastern Congo and you find a mixed race child, what white people are in Eastern Congo? It's not a hot tourism destination, so my assumption is most of the fathers will be aid workers and UN staff. So we're getting ready to go, and then welcome back the misanderistic feminists. You are re-victimizing the victims because you are male. And I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. I have this radical theory that if I turn up to a woman in Goma and I say, if your child spits into this tube, I might, but can't promise, but might be able to find that child's father. And if I find that child's father, I might, but I can't promise, I might be able to get a child support order and citizenship. The grand total number of women that will say to me, no, don't do that because you're re-victimizing me because you're male, I think is going to be zero. But when an academic feminist sitting on an ivory tower in Birmingham, UK, or Queen University in Canada, because that's where these academics were from, prognosticates about the best interests of a poor woman in Congo without speaking to that poor woman in Congo, I call that neo-colonialist racism. The white woman knows what's in the black woman's interest better than the black woman does without even speaking to the black woman.
Well,
And the perversity of that radical left is they are more racist, they are more neo-colonialist than the people they fight against. So they then objected to the funders who were going to pay for all of this, who do a lot of anti-trafficking work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So they had to pull out because they didn't want a feminist academic accusing them of being unethical. So now we're like, Christ, it's derailed the entire program. So instead, I thought, okay, these misandristic feminists are also strongly protecting the UN. I'm like, right, where can I go somewhere where I can test the science and test the law of this without having to fight for people who are protecting the UN and NGOs? And the answer was popped up on my Facebook feed, a newspaper article written by a journalist named Margaret Simons in Australia. Daddy, do you ever think of me? Children left behind by sex tourists in the Philippines. So I called that journalist up and I'm like, do you reckon we could go back to the children and the mothers in your article, get their permissions and the right ethical protections around them, tell them it's an experiment, we don't know if it works, but can we take the DNA from their children and see if we can find their fathers and get rights? Long story short, out of 37 DNA tests, we've found 34 fathers, and we have court orders against men in New Zealand, Canada, Australia, US, UK. We've got passports for children. We've got child support orders for children, and we've actually totally revolutionized their kids' life. And the last thing I'll say to this, just to explain it to your listeners very clearly how this works when you don't have the father's DNA. Child M, we take her DNA. We put her DNA on the commercial databases and we get a 25% match with a guy named John. As a 25% match, John can only be the half-brother or uncle. Given that the child was 10 and John was in his 50s, he's not the half-brother, he's the uncle. We jump on John's Facebook and we find that John has two brothers, Peter and Paul. Well, if John is the uncle, Peter or Paul have to be the father. We jump on Peter and Paul's Facebook and we find that Peter has got no evidence of going to Philippines. But Paul has got Philippines all over his Facebook, including in the city where this child was born at the time, photos of him in a spa bath with a whole lot of working girls. He's the father. So we go to court, and then what you've got to do is you don't have to prove 99% he's the father. You prove on the balance of probabilities he's likely to be the father. The court then can suggest he do a confirmatory DNA test to either confirm he's the father or deny he's the father. If he does a confirmatory DNA test, that will tell you 99.9. But if he refuses, the court can draw a negative inference from the refusal and declare him the father anyway. And this becomes revolutionary for the kids. So you find the kids' extended paternal relatives triangulate backwards till you identify who the father is. Gotcha. And one of the most fulfilling things in my life is knocking on the door of a middle-aged white bloke who thought he got away with this. And if I was female, he would say, this is feminism, this is yada, yada, and he would fight. But no, middle-aged white guy to middle-aged white guy. I got you, son. I got you. 3 pieces of news. A, you've got a kid. B, your kid's got a lawyer. C, I'm your kid's lawyer. Sit down. We got a few things to talk about. And it is so much fun to watch this look of impunity fall from their faces when they know they've been caught.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, I bet.
The moment of truth. I mean, it's just...
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing about these white feminist women that are so against it, you know what? If they get a divorce, trust me, they're going after child support for their kid.
Oh, shit, yeah.
So why are these women not worthy enough to get child support for their child?
I'll tell you why. So I talk about misandristic feminism. So there's a lot of mainstream feminism that's really good and has done a lot to empower women and girls. And the single biggest empower of women and girls around the world has been better access to education. And let's be clear,
Right.
women should have the same equal opportunities as men. I have no doubt about that. Misandristic feminism, which is a subset, it's not protecting women, it's hating men. Their whole persona is driven about what they hate and what they're fighting. So the last thing they want is the solution. And if that solution is provided by the enemy, the middle-aged white man, that's even worse. So they have to do everything they can to undermine the solution provided by the middle-aged white man, because their whole persona is that men are the enemy all the time.
And that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's totally ridiculous.
We need everybody in society. We need the men.
Yeah.
We need we're the part of the human race, and people have got to stop trying to put people into categories. Men are evil.
Yeah.
You know, someone of a different race, they're evil. They're below me. No.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you take a knife and cut any of us, we all bleed red.
Yeah,
Nope.
that's right. Except Donald Trump, he bleeds royal blue. And I'll say to your listeners, because we were talking about this before. Well, see, the thing is, when I did my DNA test, I found my fourth cousin once removed is Donald J. Trump. His mother, Mary Ann MacLeod, comes from the village next door to my great-grandfather, John MacLeod, on the Isle of Lewis. And our common ancestor is Kenneth MacLeod, born in 1776. So I like to say fourth cousin once removed, which is not removed enough. I'll say, even though I wouldn't vote for Donald Trump, there's a lot of stuff there's some things that he does that I agree with. I think the Abraham Accords are great, and trying to get Middle East peace is a really good idea, and he might succeed where others haven't. But some of the stuff that he does is loony crazy. But I'd say that about every politician. Some stuff I'll agree with, and some stuff that it's not. When I map out, and this is for your listeners trying to figure out where I come from, I'm having a go at misandristic feminists in 1 second and middle-aged white blokes in another second. My political ideology, where every time I've done one of those political ideology tests, it lines up smack bang in the middle between left and right and between progressive and conservative. I am smack bang in the middle everywhere, which means when I look at any radical person, radical left, radical right, radical liberal, radical conservative, I look at them and go, you're nuts. Don't be so radical. Be a little bit more understanding, be a little bit more tolerant of other people. And if someone else chooses to live another way, they can, so long as it doesn't impact on other people. And when it comes to gender identity, sexual relations, anything like that, it comes down to a phrase, consenting adult. And if you're not a consenting adult, it shouldn't happen to you. So rape, it's not consenting. Hormone blockers to a 12-year-old, not an adult. So, I come back to, bottom line, consenting adults can do whatever they like. Like when the gay marriage debate comes up, I'm never been married, but I am heterosexual. Do I worry about gay people getting married? No, I'm not fussed at all. And in fact, now that we have linked or delinked marriage from child procreation, I have no problem with polygamy either. If three people decide they want to get married, because marriage now, the way our societies have evolved it, is a contract about sharing resources for life. We've delinked it from the procreation of children. So if marriage is the sharing of resources for life, why can't three people do it? So now people are going to really scratch their heads. Okay, you hate misandristic feminism. You're saying polygamy can be good. And it's like, yeah, my bottom line comes down to this: consenting adult.
Well, and I think if everyone should be able to agree that abuse of children, it's wrong. I don't care who you are. It's wrong. And that should be just a common thing among everybody, and that pedophiles need to be removed.
You've hit the nail on the head, which has frustrated me a lot. When I started this work, okay, let's be really, really clear here. Child abuse in the UN system. I didn't think it would be hard to get people to buy on the statement, don't rape children.
Yeah.
But it's actually been really hard because they distract into so many other areas. So let me just throw to your listeners, because some people are going, is this really a big thing? Is this really bad? I say, okay, let's look at it this way. The National Crime Agency in the UK estimates about 1 in 35 men have pedophilic tendencies, about 3%. How they get that data, I'm not sure. Does it kind of make sense to me? Yes, it does. And people might be scratching their head. Does that sound too high or too low? Think about it this way. A psychologist said to me once, Andrew, stop thinking of this as a sickness, because if you think of pedophilia as a sickness, you think that it can A, be detected, and B, it can be cured. It can neither be detected nor can it be cured. What it is a hardwiring in the brain that's just wrong. Think about what you are sexually attracted to, Andrew. And I was thinking about what I'm sexually attracted to. Why are you attracted to that? I'm like, I don't know. And the psychologist is like, that's it. Some like tall, some like short, some like fat, some like skinny, some like blonde, some like brunette, some like male, some like female, some like old, some like young. And there's a hardwiring in the brain. And the minute you accept it's a hardwiring in the brain that can't be detected and cured, it's got to be stopped. So you've got to put much stronger preventative mechanisms in place. Right. So National Crime Agency estimate about 1 in 35 men, about 3% have pedophilic tendencies. In other words, if you know 100 men, then you know 3 pedophiles. And if someone says to me, are there pedophiles in Congress? Or how many men are in Congress? 400, 3% of which is 12. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. There are 12 pedophiles in Congress. So by accepting it's a hardwiring in the brain and by accepting that it can't be detected, you then accept that there is a percentage of people in every single population that are potential predators. Right. Mm-hmm. So if the underlying prevalence in Britain is about 3%, and it's going to be something similar in every community around the world, right. US, Australia, what have you. Right. Then the National Crime Agency has also said that as we crack down on predatory pedophiles in the developed world, the predators now go to the developing world, and their chosen methodology to get access to children is to join a children's charity. Now, the minute I say that out loud, 2 thoughts should come into your mind. One is that's disgusting, and the other is that's logical. Predators go to where there's prey. They used to go to schools and scout halls and things like that. We start to crack down on that, so they go to where the next soft target is. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Save the Children, UNICEF, and all these charities are the targets for the predators. Yeah. They seek to join those organizations to get unsuspicious access to children.
Yep. Well, and now, especially when they get to go to a foreign country where there's less laws.
Right. Yeah, let me dig into this a little bit further. Right. So under communities, 3%. The UN and the NGOs are an industry that now attracts higher than normal predators. The child abuse inquiry in Australia, we had an inquiry into institutionalised child abuse, found that 7% of the Catholic clergy participated in pedophilia. Right. So if the underlying prevalence is 3 and an industry that attracts people is 7%, where's the UN and NGOs? I'm going to say it's going to be halfway between those two. Let's call it 5% as a safe starting assumption. Again, this is not data. This is an assumption based on extrapolation of what we have from other places. There are 500,000 aid workers in the world today. About 300,000 of them are male, 5% of which is 15,000. Is it a safe starting assumption to say there's about 15,000 men with pedophilic tendencies in the developing world where, as you rightly say, civil society is broken down, law enforcement doesn't work, you can bribe your way out of things, with access to children and controlling food, water and shelter? Now, I don't need to say there is a grand cabal of secret pedophiles dragging everybody in. I just need to say there is opportunity to offend. There's no preventative mechanisms in place to stop people offending. So what's going to happen? Offending. And it's going to be on the scale of the Catholic Church or larger. And when people go, hang on, now you're crazy. I'm like, no. Think about it this way. There are more aid workers than there are Catholic priests in more countries than the Catholic Church is present in, with more access to children, controlling food, water and shelter. Now, what makes us think the average aid worker is any better than the average Catholic priest? So the answer is we are talking in the aid industry about a problem of abuse and pedophilia that's larger than the Catholic Church, not because of some secret cabal, simply because of the scale.
Right. And you're not even talking about the females that are predators.
No.
Because that's becoming a bigger thing. So, and it makes sense because we did a show on the ministers and the preachers. I had so many here just in the state of Texas. I could have had a show for about 6 hours naming different ministers and preachers because
And-
they
and-
go where the kids are.
And the reason is because sex crimes are crimes of power, not crimes of sex.
Yes.
So if there's a woman who wants to assert her power over her child, that's one of the ways in which it can be done. And if your listeners have any doubt about this, Google the following: female sex tourism Gambia. And the country of Gambia is now the go-to destination for British female sex tourists.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good Lord.
Wow.
Well, I was following a case I had just heard about in the UK, and oh man, her name escapes me, but her last name was Black. I can't remember if it was Marie, but she actually had a trafficking thing with her husband, and they were trafficking their own children with other couples. And it was just like,
Yeah.
people, so
Remember,
if your neighbor's
sex-
doing this, why do you think that these other people are not out there
Yeah,
taking the opportunity?
most sex abuse of children happens in the family.
Yeah.
A step parent is 100 times more likely to abuse than a parent. And if I go back into the Philippines, most of the women and girls involved in the sex industry, and the boys too, were encouraged to go into the sex industry by their mothers.
Yeah.
Not by their fathers, by their mothers. And it's one aspect of the child sex industry in the Philippines I've never really been able to fully wrap my head around. Why is it predominantly mothers who are the ones who should be protecting the most? Why is it predominantly the mothers that encourage their children into this? And when people say to me, it's because of poverty, I really push back hard on that, because my last mission for the UN was in the Philippines in 2008 and 9. Every country I'd been in in the 10 years before Philippines, every country was poorer than the Philippines. And the problem wasn't in the Philippines. Philippines actually has a problem because of relative wealth. That kids have access to the internet and they start their journey into sex tourism by performing shows on live stream camming to men in, countries all around the world. And that's the entry point. So it's actually, and it gets me on another hobby horse, today, the main connection between predator and prey is via social media, particularly Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And the social media companies have the ability to detect in advance abuse, but they choose not to.
Mm-hmm.
And just so this doesn't sound crazy, one of the kids I was working with in the Philippines who we found the father of, her mother had created at least 12 Facebook profiles for the child, segmented the market to different men's. One Facebook profile was mainly aimed at Korean men, another one at Saudi men, another one at Indian men, another one at American men. And when I saw this, I was able to map out the different profiles, as many that I could find, that the mother had created for the child. And then I learned what predators do is they all follow each other. And when the predator finds a child, all the other predators bomb on. So on one of these child's Facebook accounts, there was 2,500 Facebook friends that were all men outside of the Philippines on this, what she then was a 12-year-old girl.
Yeah.
So I can map out a network of predators. But because so many of the predators don't have the highest security features on Facebook, you then go onto theirs and then you map out who they're following. And who they're following are a whole bunch of children. That's how you know they're predators. So I can, in a couple of days with a pen and paper, map out a network of predators. I can then map out a network of prey and potential prey. Now, the social media companies could, in 1 squintillionth of a second with an algorithm, actually do that mapping. Yes, you could map out the predators very quickly. You could map out victims very quickly. But here's the thing that really pisses me off. You could map out the potential victims and you could do an intervention and stop abuse taking place. Now, what do you call an organization that links predator and prey, has the ability to map out predator and prey, has the ability to intervene to stop someone becoming a victim, but for commercial purposes chooses not to? What do you call that organization? Right now, we call them a profit-making company. What we should call them is criminal.
Mm-hmm.
Criminal.
Yeah, they're not only criminal, they're compliant. They are totally compliant in the whole situation, because with Facebook, I was doing some work for someone looking into some It was a missing woman's case. And I was finding so many young girls, and you could tell by the website, you could tell by who their friends were, what they were doing with it. And it was
Yeah.
it was all about sex. And
Yeah.
if you try, there's no phone number to call Facebook and say, hey, you can't get a live person. I even had a situation.
I can't even get Facebook to take down the profiles of the child for whom I'm the lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's criminal. That is absolutely criminal.
So in military law, you have a criminal offense called failure to prevent. And it's
Right.
more in military law than it is in civilian law.
Okay.
And under military law, if you as an officer, as I was in the Australian military, if you haven't undertaken all actions reasonable in prevention, detection and training to stop a war crime taking place, you are also guilty of the offence because you should have put the training and the detection mechanisms in place. And the offence is failure to prevent. It's actually a criminal offence. And one of the things I want to lobby for is we should make failure to prevent abuse a crime as well. Now, in Australia, we've got some of the leading overseas child protection laws. It's an offence, as it is in the United States, for any Australian to have sex with a child under the age of 16 anywhere in the world. And it's a criminal offence back in Australia, similar in the United States. But Australia has now criminalised the failure to report an overseas child sex offence.
Okay.
And every other country should do that as well.
Yes.
And, when the internet was first created, and the social media companies love saying this, we're not publishers. We were given an exemption from defamation law by not being publishers to allow the creation of social media. We're just the platform. The person who puts it up is the publisher. I'm like, fine, keep that law. I'm talking about criminal law, failure to prevent. You have the mechanisms to prevent child abuse. And as you said earlier, it shouldn't be hard to get people to say don't rape children.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Mark Zuckerberg. You have the platform, Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
That is the most widely used platform, Mark Zuckerberg, to connect rapists with the children they rape, and you're not stopping it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm an atheist. Sometimes I wish I was deeply religious because that man will go to hell.
Yeah. Well, and now we're focusing on roadblocks is another big one that is hugely. In fact, they sued the kid that was working with the police to actually catch predators, and Roblox has actually told him he had to get off of their platform and they were going to sue him.
Yeah.
For hunting predators with police permission.
Well, you find that with the social media, you're talking about Zuckerberg. I find that if there's no money in it for them, they aren't going to prevent it because it's making money for them.
Yeah,
that's right. And again, I go back to the phrase, what do you call an organization that links predator and prey, could detect it in advance, could prevent someone from being abused, but chooses not to for commercial reasons? At the moment, we call them a profitable company.
Yep. I
what
think
we should call them is criminal.
Accomplice. They're an accomplice to the act.
Yep. Yeah,
because
absolutely.
That's because I had this situation where I was looking something up and all of a sudden I saw this U.S. general. Okay. And he had this Facebook page, and then he had another and another. This man had over 1,000 pages. Now, I know it was not him. So people were using this and they had from all different countries were using his face in uniform. And of course, you can't get a hold of Facebook. I actually, which I don't know, I decided, hey, I'm going to call one of the military bases close to me and let them know. I don't know if they know.
Yeah.
And so I did. And the guy that I talked to said, well, I'm not surprised. He says, but we can't get Facebook to ever answer us. So even the U.S. military cannot get him to answer, and he's just making more money
because there's no incentive. Look, the two best ways to change behavior is take someone's money or take someone's liberty. And until such time as we criminalize these offenses, and I don't mean criminalize the corporation. I mean criminalize the individuals that are the decision makers in the corporation.
Yeah.
Mark Zuckerberg should go to jail. Facebook shouldn't be fined. Mark Zuckerberg should go to jail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, do we have to get a bumper sticker that says raping a child is bad? I mean, it's like, come on, people. This is simple. This is like 1 + 1 = 2.
So let's come back into the positive for a second. So what we're creating now is a tool that helps show the scale of the problem, and a tool where many children will be able to find their heritage. Now, when I say children, there is an organisation in Norway called Children Born of War that's still trying to find the genetic heritage of children born in World War II. So there are people in their late 80s and 90s who are saying the last thing I want to do before I die is find out who I am, which is why we've got to start to understand children born of abuse are also victims of abuse.
Right.
And there's a case I helped work on in the United Kingdom, and your listeners can Google this as well. It ultimately created a thing called Daisy's Law, where a young woman came to me, early 20s, I think she was at the time, came to me and said, Andrew, help. I was adopted at birth. After I turned 18, I got my adoption file, and I found that my birth father was in his 30s and my birth mother was 13. As it turned out, the birth father was a friend of the birth mother's father, and the birth mother was babysitting for the birth father, and the birth father raped her. So when the child at the age of 13 gets pregnant, police are called in. They go, oh, we don't want to really look at this. So the child born of the child is adopted out.
Right.
So when she gets her adoption file and finds her birth mother was 13 and her birth father in his 30s, she turns up to the police and says, why didn't you prosecute my father? To which the police say, none of your business. You weren't the victim of rape. We're not telling you. She then comes to me and says, what do I do? And I said, well, what does your birth mother say? And she said, well, my birth mother doesn't really want to do much about this. And I'm like, well, I accept you as a child born of rape is a secondary victim of rape, but the primary victim of rape is your mother. And if your birth mother doesn't want to do anything about it, you're going to have to respect that. She came back a few weeks later and said, my birth mother now wants to prosecute. I'm like, right, this is what you do. You and your birth mother turn up to the police and you say, why didn't you prosecute the birth father? They're going to say, you're not the victim, privacy. Then you turn around to your mother and say, well, she is the victim. And then they're going to say, old, don't have evidence, dusty cupboards, yada, yada, yada. Then what you do is you give them my card. Now, in common law legal systems, Australia, Canada, United States, United Kingdom, we all think it's the government that prosecutes criminal offences because it actually is. But in each of the common law legal systems, there's also the ability to take a private criminal prosecution, i.e. anyone can prosecute anyone else for a criminal law. It very rarely happens because it's expensive, but the rules of evidence apply to you, the rules of defamation would apply, so it's quite a dangerous thing to do. You've got to be sure. So I said, give them my card and say, Professor Andrew MacLeod will take a private criminal prosecution if you do not. And the first thing he's going to do is subpoena all of your internal documents to see why you didn't prosecute in the first place. And I said, the police are not going to like that. And the way to shut me up is they take the prosecution. So that's what happened. The police took the prosecution and this guy actually went to jail. Daisy then came back. And the reason I can say all of this publicly is because she then advocated for all of this publicly. She then turned around and said, I want no other child to go through that I went through. I want children born of rape to be considered victims of rape as well. And she had passed through law in the United Kingdom, what's called Daisy's Law. The children born of rape are now recognised as victims of rape as well, as they should be. Going back to the middle-aged white man going, what do you mean multi-generational trauma? Believe me, it's real. That children who don't know who their parents are, it becomes a critical element in their identity. And what we're creating is a tool where children can find who their parents are. It doesn't work all the time, but it works a lot of the time. And in the cases where children are born from abuse, it can be rape, it can be physical coercion, but I just happen to think that someone who comes from a rich country and goes to a poor country and uses the financial imbalance to get sex is also abuse. Now, there are some Looney Tune feminists out there who turn around and say, no, prostitution is an assertion of women's independence and strength, and it's an assertion of female independence. I'm like, frog shit. 1 in 1,000 prostitutes might be, no, I'm fully empowered and I'm making my own decision and I want to join this industry without any pressure on me. And fine, that 1 in 1,000 women who do that, knock your socks off, consenting adult, I am not fussed. But most women go into prostitution because they're forced to by circumstances or because they're trafficked. Mm-hmm. So any feminist that's out there saying you shouldn't be criticising prostitution as an industry because it's an assertion of female independence can go and screw themselves because they're wrong. And so if a man goes overseas and pays for a consenting adult relationship, yeah, it's not rape.
Right.
But it is abuse. Now, the child born of that didn't consent to any of this, which is why whenever I do my work, I'm not asserting the rights of the father or the mother. I'm asserting the rights of the child. So when people say to me it was consensual or it was transactional or you can't prove that it was rape, none of that matters when you're asserting the rights of the child.
Right.
Because the right of the child is who is my father and what are the rights that I have that derive from who my father is. And if your father is British, you're a British citizen. If your father is Australian, you have the right to apply for Australian citizenship. If your father is American, you also do. If you're still under 18, the father has to pay for your education. And when the father said, but I didn't know as a father, well, fine, you might not have known you're a father, but you certainly knew that you put an unprotected penis inside a vagina.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Because that doesn't happen accidentally.
No. You knew there was a risk. I'm sorry.
You knew there was a risk.
And the thing, I will agree there probably are those women that eventually maybe they decide to become a prostitute, but the road to getting there a lot of times it comes from being abused as a young child themselves, going through some kind of trauma. Most little girls when they're 10 years old and you're in a classroom and you say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Prostitute is not the word they come up with.
No, it's not even in the top 10.
No.
Princess and firefighter will beat prostitute every time.
Yeah. Yep. So, I mean, for women to say that those people, they need to seek some psychological help.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, that's just wrong. Okay. Are we live?
We are live.
Yay. Okay, guys, that was our first part. He was one of the most easy people to talk to and have a great conversation with. And I totally enjoyed this. We will have part 2 next Sunday. And for those of you that are worried about donating to charities, he's going to discuss that along with other topics. We go into so much. And yet I told him I could still talk to you about other things. And he said, yeah, we'll have to. So it was really cool. He was very generous with his time and we really appreciated it. So quickly, I do have a few of our missing people and stay alert, you guys, so you might be able to save a life if you remember these faces when you're out in public. And let's go ahead and get to our people. Remember, we do have a tip line if people are afraid to contact the police. It's tips, the number 4, trialjunkiesunited@gmail.com. And we'll pass the information along. But it's no big deal, you guys, Colin. You can do it. Trust me. Okay, our first person, this is Juanita Winnie Migwans. It's Migwans, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. That's not my main talent is pronunciation.
Migwans?
I don't know. She's 31. She's been missing now a year, since October 4th of 2024, from the Riverside Drive in I'm not even going to try that, in Manitoulin Island. She's 5'6". She's a slim build. Hair and eyes are both brown. She's has a tattoo on her right foot. It says, "This too shall pass." She was wearing dark pants and a dark shirt. There is a $100,000 reward for information to finding her. Please contact the Ontario Provincial Police at 888-310-1122 or Crime Stoppers, 800-222-8477. The reference number is R as in Robert, M as in Michael, 2425-1640. Our next person is Kale, jealous of him. He's 16. He's been missing since September 18th, 2025, from Rapid City, South Dakota. He has brown eyes, black hair, and he's 6 foot tall and 150 pounds. Last seen wearing a black stocking cap, black bubble jacket, black hoodie, stone-washed blue jeans. Any information on Kale, you guys, please contact Rapid City Police Department at 605-394-4131 or 911. Our last one is Portia Nicole Brooks. She's 16. This is September 13th of 2025 that she went missing from Lumberton, North Carolina. She's got brown eyes. They didn't mention her hair color, but from the picture, blonde with dark roots, if it's still that color. If you have any information, call the Lumberton Police Department at 910-671-3845 or 911. The National Children's Missing Exploited line is 1-800-843-5678. She does have a number with them, and their reference number is M as in Michael, 00847-1723, and the other reference number is 206-1496. She needs to be found. So remember, you guys, every killer depends on your silence. Please don't give it to them. If you know something, speak up, because that wasn't a mannequin. It never is. And remember, someone knows something. Someone always does. And tonight we've seen how silence has protected predators for far too long. Sex tourists, abusive aid workers, men who thought oceans and borders would hide their crimes. They all depended on silence. They've counted on the world looking away from the children they abandoned, the women they exploited, and also the children they have exploited, and the lives they've shattered. But genetic genealogy doesn't stay silent. Travel records don't stay quiet. And organizations like HearTheirCries.org refuse to remain silent. What happened in Edmonton, Canada on December 19th of 2023 wasn't just a verdict, it was a warning shot heard around the world. This precedent isn't just one case. It's about shattering the silence that had protected predators across the continents. It reaches across every common law jurisdiction, the UK, Australia, the United States, New Zealand. Predators can no longer hide behind distance, time, or the assumption that their victims are too powerless to reach them. It's about giving a voice to the voiceless, you guys. It's about giving those who thought they were untouchable, now they have accountability. Someone always knows something. A coworker who noticed the humanitarian taking frequent trips, a friend who heard the bragging, a family member who saw the signs. The silence protects them. Your voice can stop them. This is just part one of our conversation with Professor Andrew MacLeod. I invite you guys to come back next Sunday for part two, and we're going to dive deeper into the fight for justice. Until then, truth seekers, please share this interview. Let's get more people's eyes on it so we can get the word out and be part of the movement. Of course, you know me, wrote another song, the song on the beginning and the song on the end were both written concerning this. Please stay vigilant, stay vocal, never give predators the gift of your silence. I'm Z with Doc, who is riding shotgun with us tonight.
Yes, I'm still here, guys.
So stay informed and stay compassionate and seek justice. I love you all. We appreciate you being here and being part of our community. We'll see you Thursday night. I'm hoping to have a guest with concerning our Native and Indigenous family members. So remember, though, next Sunday, part two, don't miss it. This is Trial Junkies United. We appreciate you all, and ciao. Love ya.
if you think you can cross a vast ocean, prey on the innocent, run and hide. Sow your wild oats in foreign lands, leaving broken hearts trembling in your wake. You'd better watch out, your day will come. The reckoning has begun for what you've done. There's a knock coming to your door, justice won't forget, that's for sure. We hear their cries across the sea, the children asking, who am I? Where's my family? Professor MacLeod is leading the fight, bringing shadows into the light. No more hiding, no more lies, we hear their cry. Attorneys knocking on your door tonight. I've got news for you, turns out you have a child. I'm their lawyer, time to settle what's been overdue. It could happen now or in decades to come. Maybe when you're 80, thinking you're fine, but the truth comes out, your kids at home will learn you escaped what predators should pay. Option 2, high lives you won't claim, in charity's name or uniform pride. Predatorist, no second thought, no backward glance. We hear their cries across the sea, the children asking, who am I? Where's my family? Professor MacLeod is leading the fight, bringing shadows into the light. No more hiding, no more lies, we hear their cries. Every child deserves to know where they're from, their roots, their home. We will not be silenced anymore. We're standing up, we're keeping score. No cover-ups, no looking the other way. For the women and children left behind. We hear their cries across the sea, the children asking, who am I? Where's my family? Join the cause, join the fight. We're bringing justice into the light. Your reckoning will arrive. We hear their cries. We hear their cries. We hear their cries. We hear their cries. We hear their coming. You can't hide. The truth will find you. Far and wide. We hear their cries. We listen to their cries.